Well, give this a shot. My last few videos have just been denied or immediately taken down and given strikes for on YouTube or whatever. I'll give it a shot though. Rumble, for some reason, won't upload videos, and then when I try to go live or do like a Rumble, it'll only upload 30 seconds, and then it won't maintain more than a minute. Anyway, kind of sucks, and it's crappy streaming compared to YouTube too, which sucks. Hopefully they come around. I'll keep going there. I was watching a Joe Rogan with a paleontologist. He was arguing about Eric Dubai. Actually, it was greasing him out about the dinosaurs never existing theory that flat earthers have. Dinosaurs existed. We called them dragons. They existed right with us. We dig up sculptures, pottery with pictures on the side of it of dinosaurs and stuff like that all the time. Humans clearly existed with dinosaurs throughout history. The kings and queens back then actually had the position of the royal dragon feeder. And they weren't Komodo dragons. Well, they might have been some, but it was all sorts of dragons. There was dragon hunters all over the world. There's actually still to this day, there's a bug that has big antenna things on its head or whatever, and they're just hollow tubes, and they hold two different chemicals that the bug makes in that tube, and when he spits them out, they mix together and he breathes fire. So to think that there wasn't a fire-breathing dragon, well, there probably was. All of that legend, mythology that we're pushed to not believe while we're pushed to believe dinosaurs in billions of years. See, and these two are arguing whether they existed at all. So the whole argument's a straw man. Right off the get-go, there is no fucking argument. Neither of you are right. You're both arguing falsities. So you got nothing to stand on either side. Anyway, it was frustrating to listen to this paleontologist. I can't remember what his name was. I called him Captain Indoctrination. He obviously was a little chubby kid who just loved dinosaurs. He must have just ate those up and spent his whole life studying these dinosaurs and just loves them and digs them up. And he works 3 jobs in order to be able to afford to go looking for dinosaurs, and which is ridiculous because they're funded by like these big billionaires or whatever, but they're kept controllable by paying them very little amounts. That's how they maintain control over them, because they could squash these people at any time. If you tried to come out, if he actually woke up and discovered what was really going on and changed what he was talking about, he'd be disgraced and he'd be breaking a bunch of contracts, so he'd be sued and thrown into prison and silenced, and nobody'd ever hear from him again, and he'd just disappear. And the media would, there'd be a few flat earthers maybe and stuff like that who would talk about him a bit, but we'd get so little press for him that he'd just be disappeared, and that's how they've done it in the past, at least. There's a beach in Australia that's the closest beach to Antarctica on the world, and if you were a geologist and you were going to prove the flat earth, this is where you would go, to this beach, right? And it's a fact. I had to read this over and over because it's such a confusing sentence. More geologists have died on that beach than have ever been stationed there. So they're going there to look at something and investigate, being seen to investigate that, and then being killed there. There's no other explanation. Because if they're not getting stationed there, they're going there on their own free will. When they get there, they're being killed. You don't go on an expedition to a beach like that unaware of the fucking dangers. You wouldn't go there unprepared for the cold. You'd build yourself up a little bit before you went there. You'd be prepared. You'd have people with you that really knew what they were doing, even more so. And there's fucking a little building and stuff there and all that. Now, I'm sure that some of them have fallen into crevices and stuff like walking around. But they could have just as easily been pushed into those crevices or whatever. You know, or they closed the building door on the shack and the boat took off already. What are you going to do? You're going to freeze to death. And then they can just say, oh, I don't know, he rose to death. You know, whatever. He fell in a hole or he did this or he did that. Dangerous environment around here. Pretty easy to die. Anyway, and then Steven Crowder always says, well, how many people would have to be involved? And this guy brought it up too on Joe Rogan. In order for this conspiracy to take fruition. Well, I just explained it to you. It's not many. It's a few billionaires that fund all archaeological digs, except for one, which I'll bring up in a minute. I'm sorry for pointing. Don't mean to do that. Anyway, all of them are funded by the same billionaire group that fund everything that we get to see. And all these guys, these archaeological diggers, geologists, astrology, any of the fields that you want to talk about, it doesn't matter. They're all funded. They take their findings to their funder, and then they're told what they can talk about and what they can't. And things have to be studied for years before they're even remotely talked about, except for the Bosnian pyramid, which they tried to just shut down the dig because they hate people discovering that there's pyramids in other places than Egypt, because they want you to believe that bullshit story about the Egyptians building the pyramids with slaves, which is totally wrong. Even if you read the Book of the Jews, you'll discover really quickly that's totally bullshit. That the construction that the Hebrews worked on was shoddy at best and never made it to today. They were trying to work them so that they wouldn't be able to breed when they got home. They didn't want them to have kids. So they were trying to work them so hard that they couldn't make love when they got home from work or whatever. And it didn't work, and it didn't work, and it didn't work. So they kept upping the workload and screwing with these guys and really making them pick their own hay and to make their own bricks in order to lay their own bricks, but they had to make the same quota of bricks as when they had the hay supplied to them. And all this kind of stuff, just making their days longer and longer. Same thing they do to us. They make our weeks longer and longer. Oh, 40 hours, but then you know, in order to really survive, you got to work 50 hours or whatever, right? And then even if you do work the 50 hours, they put you into a different tax bracket, so they just take more money from you, so you never get ahead anyways. You're always stuck in this cycle, and that's why they keep you there, and that's how they do it. It's a stupid, simple system, right? And anyway, so they shit, I lost it. Damn it, I hate when that happens. Simple money grab system. Anyway, these money guys control all of your science, except for that Bosnian pyramid. And that's what I was talking about. So the Bosnian pyramid, they tried to just shut it down. They didn't want anybody digging it up. They don't want pyramids anywhere on Earth. They don't want to talk about the one at the Bermuda Triangle because it's under the ocean. They don't want to talk about the one off the coast of Newfoundland because it's under the ocean. They don't want to talk about the ones they found up north because they're under the ice. They don't want to talk about the Bosnian pyramids because they're in the wrong country. They don't want to talk about the pyramids that they found all down the western coast of America. The pyramids have to have lava line, like a fault line of lava running underneath of them. It's prerequisite of them. They have to have a river running, or terrestrial underwater rivers running underneath of them, and they have to be on the fault lines of the Earth. in order to work properly, because they upgrade your cellular level and maintain the frequency of the planet and in their area. So when they were in their working proper, all of the pyramids on Earth, I'm sure that they maintain the frequency of the planet at a greater level, and that's probably how we all lived to be 900, right? And then even after the flood, all things lead to chaos, so the bloodline was better. Like the DNA strand had more information in it than it does nowadays, so it actually, people were stronger. But I mean, we were probably a understood frequency and were more of a frequency of a being, and that's obvious in that we could breed with angels before the flood, and we can't breed with angels after the flood, or it's harder. And I think that's why 5G's around. I'm pretty sure that we're going to find that you're going to, in areas where there's 5Gs, you're going to be able to interact with the fallen angels more, or they'll be able to interact with us more, whatever. Their frequencies will be more tolerable to the earth so that they can take form. Anyway, I digest. The Bosnian pyramid, they tried to shut it down. There were a bunch of lawsuits, and it ended up that the people were in charge of the dig. They paid, the government paid for it, so that the people had to be informed in real time of everything that was discovered at the dig site. So they decided what was released, and so everything got released. And it was the first archaeological dig of its kind ever in mankind history to ever have information released like that. So thinking that you know everything, and that you know all this stuff, and you know how the universe works, and all this bullshit that you guys think you know, is just that. It's just bullshit, right? You've been pounded with a conclusion, and then you drew science to it. That's how indoctrination works. They pounded this billions of years to you, and that you know, everything had to be on this geologic time scale or whatever, which makes no sense, because the geologic time scale is absent in most of the earth, just not there. Where it is, it's found in the wrong order 80% of the time. And there's found trees going through multiple layers, and there's found trees going through multiple layers in the upside down position, which all lead to a flood. The whole fossil record proves a flood. Things, ashes to ashes, dust to dust. Things go back to dust. You don't fossilize in the fucking ground. You go to dust. Unless there's some extreme conditions to fossilize you. That's why fossils are found with green food in their stomach. The mammoths, they had to be frozen at minus 300 degrees in order to freeze in enough time for the food to stay green in their stomach and in their mouth. And that's why you get clams in the closed position. We find fish still giving birth, like mid-birth, fossilized. You know, something very traumatic had to happen. Clams in the closed position on top of Mount Everest. Something very traumatic happened. And then for every oceanic trench, there's a parallel mountain range. So before the flood, there was no oceanic trench, and there was no mountain range. So there was more earth. There was no oceans. The oceans were under the ground. And there's a lot of evidence that there was a layer of ice or water between us and the sun, which protects us from the violent UV radiation from the sun. What that does is it shoots microscopic little pellets through your skin all the time, and eventually you get old and wrinkled and your skin wears out, right? When you get old. So that wouldn't have happened as young. You know, you would have been slowed down. And then the water underneath, water on top, lots of plants inside, all contained with the sun outside of it, not burning up all that oxygen. That's a hyperbaric chamber. Everything would have been living longer, been healthier. If you got a cut, you would heal in like minutes. You would, if you sprained your ankle, broke a bone, anything like that, you'd heal so fast it would be astronomical. That's why they put people in, stroke victims and stuff like that, they put them into hypertrophic chambers in order to cure them. It's one of the best cures for so many things that it's astronomical. It's just air, right? That's why the mask is so bad for you. Plugs off your air. Air is so important. You can watch that guy on Russell Crowe talk about, he does the breathing exercises, and he actually kills cancer cells and does all this amazing stuff. And there's a whole science to it, and it's actual real science, and they've been proving it over the last 6 years or something like that. Anyway, so archaeology is controlled by these billionaires. That's it. It doesn't have to be a huge, big conspiracy with every archaeologist, every biologist, and all these people in on it. Most of them, you learn your field. And a lot of them think, well, I have this one little lie that's in my field, but this guy's field has no lies in it, so it's fine. This little indiscrepancy isn't a big deal because we got all this other stuff, right? But there's indiscrepancies in all of it, and none of yous are allowed to talk about that. It's denied amongst your field because you're under contract and things like this, and or under threat of just disgrace, right? Because if you come out and say something different than the mainstream narrative, they're going to call you crazy and try to make fun of you and blaspheme you and shoot you down until they break your will and make you fall to their will. Simple mind control. Excuse me. The Nazis and the Stalin and then the Jews, they all did it. They all do it very well. They've been working at the kinks in it for years. Even in the States back in the day, like there was some subliminal messages in all the commercials, right? You see people making jokes of it and stuff all the time. And the science believed like smoking was good. Have a cigarette. Oh, Laramie smokes. Have your Laramies with your breakfast in the morning, kids. Goes really good with your Wheaties. Or your sugar-blasted sugar puffs with sugar goodness. Part of a complete breakfast with Laramie cigarettes. We bought into all that. That was science. That was like the settled science between doctors. That smoking wasn't a big deal to your body. It wasn't going to hurt you. It wouldn't slow down your life. Same thing now. They talk about like the McDonald's meats and all that kind of stuff. Now they're pushing towards this vegetarian meat that isn't even plant. Really, by the time they fill it full of processed chemicals and do the things to it that they need to do, and you get your veggie burger, you might as well have gotten the real beef burger. There's no health benefit, I guess, between the two. There's so-called there is a very big economic benefit to the veggie burger, and there's a global push for beef to be bad for the environment or whatever, the environmental push, that's the words I was looking for veggies to be better. And obviously veggies are good for the earth, but there's a balance. Everything in balance, and see, we don't balance our farms the way we're supposed to, and then we burn them out, and all this stuff happens, and then we end up blaming the cows because, again, bad conclusions. Good science, bad conclusions. The NASA scientist that he was trying to prove gravity or something. Anyway, he went into a vacuum. He didn't go in, obviously. He hung a bowling ball and a feather in a vacuum, and he sucked all the air out, and then he dropped them, and they hit the ground at the same time. He actually did it with air first, and then without air. But you know what happens with air, buoyancy law. The bowling ball smashes on the ground, the feathers fall slow. And then once they took the air out of the room, the two fell at the same rate, hit the ground, and both bounced the same and everything. And so that proved that gravity didn't exist and that everything's based on buoyancy law. So air is the resisting factor in our environment that gives us all resistance. And we are actually swimming in it, if you wanted to technically think about it like that. Like fish live in water because that's the medium that they swim through. We live in air because that's the medium we swim through. Birds fly in the air because that's the medium that they can swim through. It's density. Anyways, when he dropped the bowling ball and the feather, his conclusion was that the feather and the bowling ball never moved at all, but the earth moved to them, which, by that logic, if he was in Australia or China or the other side of the earth, that feather and the bowling ball should fall to the ceiling, because the earth would be moving away from the object, which we all know would not be the case. Logically, you can state that gravity or buoyancy, everything works the same in Australia. Everything. All experiments work the same in Australia except for the toilet water as they do here. Like we get the same results, especially when it comes to gravity, buoyancy, and all of those things. Like there isn't different gravity at different points of the earth or whatever. Anyway, it was frustrating to listen to this paleontologist, and it's frustrating to listen to the Eric Dubai or whatever his name is. He doesn't know what he's talking about anymore than the paleontologist did. They both have a lot of science and a lot of information, and they're both, well, I guess Eric's drawing his own conclusion, and it's seemingly wrong in my opinion, and the paleontologist is drawing the conclusion that he was taught to draw, and then that is definitely wrong. Billions of years could never have happened. Millions of years, billions of years. That there's so many limiting factors in our universe to state the alternative that we shouldn't have to entertain that argument anymore. It's been disproven. Billions of years, the sun shrinks, so if you go back in time it grows. So if the sun was millions of years back, it would have been millions of feet bigger. So that would be a huge problem. We'd all been burned to death. We wouldn't have been the third rock from the sun at a certain point. We'd have been the first, right? Like it would have been right there. They say the moon broke off of Earth. Well, where's the freaking crater, first off? But then, secondly, and that's why it's getting further away, but it's two balls of rock both owning gravity, a pulling force, getting further from each other in orbit, which makes absolutely no sense. The fact that there would be a vacuum of space and then a container of air on Earth, there would have to be an actual container to maintain the air, or we would be evenly distributed throughout space. If you put your arm in a vacuum, if you were tough enough to sit there and go through it, your arm would liquefy, actually explode, and you would be evenly distributed throughout the vacuum. You could do that to bugs if you were, or not to bugs, sorry, bugs won't do it because they got a skeleton on the outside of their skin rather than having skin. But you could do it to like lab rats or something like that if you were a sick person and you wanted to put them into a container and then suck the air out of there. yeah, they die or go to sleep or whatever before they would implode, but it would still be a very painful process. I would think the death would be, choking for air, trying to breathe it in and not getting it, and then eventually being torn apart and evenly distributed, pop, throughout the vacuum chamber. This has been proven in examples and stuff. And then there couldn't be thrust in a vacuum because without air to molecules to push against, thrust doesn't work. Thrust only can. The only reason we can shoot rockets and stuff is because we have air as a median to build up underneath, and we build more and more air pressure, which pushes us up. It's not. It's a pushing force. The fuel burning propels us forward. It's against the air. It's not about heat. It's about the pushing of the air molecules underneath of you. And so if there was no air molecules like there would be in space, then obviously. And then doing spacewalks and things like that would be impossible. Those spacesuits those guys would be getting sucked right out. Like Buzz Aldrin had a zipper so that he could have a pee on his spacesuit. He'd have been sucked right out through that zipper and evenly distributed throughout space, just like that. When he was on the moon jumping around, the moon would have went pow, and he would have been left behind in space. Because the Earth's moving, the sun's moving, the moon's moving, and there's no atmosphere on the moon to hold you safe. But somehow it was all dust on the ground when they're walking around, leaving footprints in it. But it's whipping through space like that, and none of the dust is coming off. How we were all fooled. It's not your fault that you were fooled. You were a child, and they attacked your mind and fooled you into believing what they wanted you to believe. It's the same thing that the religions do. They manipulated that book in order to get you to believe things that they want you to believe too. And so you got to go and do your own research, learn your own stuff, see what's real, do some experimentation, some tests, and demonstrate to yourself and show yourself approval for all the things that you think. Or otherwise, it's just you spewing off at the fucking mouth. You could say that I'm just spewing off at the mouth. I know that douchebag would try to tear my video apart, saying that I am not going up against anybody in a conversation. I would love to. If you want to go up against me in a conversation, go on to Joe Rogan, whatever. I know that you're going to get angry and lash out, so maybe we should have security there so you don't beat me up. You big grape ape. But that's that would be your only reaction, right? It's the reaction of all people defending their religion and stuff like that too, right? Like that's what you do to defend your religion. And what you believe, your indoctrination, is your religion. Heliocentricism is a religion. It's an ism. It's not science. There's no fact there. There's no real scientific evidence that leads us to believe in heliocentricism. It's all, every part of it is full of holes and misrepresentations. When the school board in the 90s was called out for it, there was 25 lies all surrounding age of the earth and evolution in our textbooks in the States, not in ours in Canada, I'm sure. They're all the same lies, though, in every book all over the world. 25 lies in the textbooks proven to the school board, and they said, we don't like the word lie. We prefer to call it misrepresentation. Well, I don't like to be called Jay anymore. I prefer to be called Jason. But I'm still the same thing. Still the same skin, the same bones, the same person. You know, I got baptized and I'm a little different and I act different. But I'm still fundamentally the same guy. So whether they want to call it a lie or a misrepresentation, it's still fundamentally the same shit. It's still nothing. It's still bullshit. How about we call it that? You're bullshitting me. and then it wouldn't be such an argument, right? But they won't even allow teachers to teach you about the holes, the tremendous holes in their theory. There's all kinds of them, and they've been shown to them, and they'll even admit to them. Oh, there's major holes in our theory. A sickly, what was the quote? A sickly weight hangs over the evolution theory, but we can't let it go because our only option is to believe in a God. But the quote, I can't remember how he described God. He described it different. A deity, or something, a deideic creator, or whatever he said. Whatever. So, our only other option is to admit that there's a God, and we don't want to admit that there's a God because once you admit that there's a God, then you have to change the way we act on Earth. You have to change who we are. So then you got to become Jason instead of being Jay or whatever, because you're aware, right? Anyway, so I'll keep going. The angles of the sun also prove that the sun is close. The fact that we can take pictures, high altitude pictures at like 120,000 feet, but we're taking a picture of Earth like this, and the sun's here in the frame, and the end of the picture's up here above the sun, then that would mean that you would be seeing 93 million miles of Earth. You know, more than 93 million miles, because you're seeing above the sun, and it's directly above Earth. You're seeing Earth behind the sun, Earth in front of the sun, Earth all the way around the sun, plus you're seeing the sun and all of space above the sun. So you'd have to be seeing more Earth, or as much Earth, as you're seeing sun. Do you understand how that works? So the sun could not be 93 billion miles away and us get weather balloon pictures at 120,000 feet and see above the sun. It just couldn't happen, except for just in the dusk of the day when the sun was coming up, but there would be no Earth behind the sun. In the picture, the Earth would all be here, and the sun and the horizon would be even with each other. It wouldn't be like this, with the sun here and seeing all above it like that. It's not how pictures work. It's not how your eyes work. It just, and then they say stupid things like, oh, well, you'd be able to see across the world from the high mountain or whatever. You can't see the end of a hallway in a long building. You can't. And when you go to the top of Mount Everest, you see a lot more Earth. As you go up, you see more and more and more and more. And the horizon always comes